coming. It really is, it's like coming back home in the sense of coming to a community college, because that's where I started. And I do want to say thank you to Olivia and to Aaron and everyone who made this happen. And I just, walked across the STEM Center and thought, like, wow, this is wonderful. I'm really glad that you guys have this and really supporting STEM. So anyway, as a lecturer or the flyer states, I'm here to share with you my story of how I became a medical doctor. And it's not just going to be a chronological or timeline that I'm going to give you, but I'm going to also give to you is kind of like what the drivers, what my motivations were to continue my education. Secondly, how I evolved as a student. And thirdly, kind of the lessons learned that I want to kind of share that with you. And then lastly, like this slide shows, why I think you should consider becoming a doctor. So let me get started. I'm from Salinas. It's only about an hour and a half away from here. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with Salinas or not. But I've come to learn that a lot of people are familiar with Salinas. Before I go there, I do want to just say briefly, I'm an internist. My specialty is internal medicine. And if you're wondering what that is, it's okay, because I didn't know what that was until I went to medical school. And so as an internist, I see patients who are 18 and older, so basically adults. And I see patients who are, who have concerns anyway from head to toe. And like I tell my patients, it's, I'm an internist, I'm concerned about internal organs. And so my breadth of knowledge is across organ systems. And if I have a patient, for example, who has a heart condition, I would refer them to my colleagues who, like a cardiologist, who their breadth of knowledge is, is a particular organ system. So anyway, so I'm an internist. But anyway, so like I mentioned, I'm from Salinas, and I realized that people have come to hear about Salinas basically for three different reasons. Either because, about John Steinbeck, the great American writer. So he's from Salinas, and he wrote The Graves of Wrath, The East of Eden, of Mice and Men. But also people know Salinas because it was where there was a lot of activism, farm worker activism, Cesar Chavez, the strikes and all that. But also, unfortunately, Salinas is also infamous because of its gangs. There's a lot of gang activity, and I have two teenage sons, and they know that when we go to Salinas, and it's still my hometown, I still consider it my home, they know not to wear red, and they know not to wear blue, and they can't walk around because it's dangerous. And I was just in Salinas last night because my mom called me. I was preparing for this talk, and my mom called me, and I'll say it in Spanish, but I'll translate it in English. She calls and says, "Mija, tu papá está enfermo, no quiere ir con su doctor y no quiere ir al hospital. Necesito que vengas." But what my mom said in English was, "Your dad's sick. He doesn't want to go to his doctor. He doesn't want to go to the hospital. You need to come." So that's where I was last night in Salinas. He's fine. But anyway, so, not that far away. And it's really nice because I can go see my parents. And anyway, so I'm going to give you a little bit of my background. My parents are from Mexico. They're from Jalisco. And just like a lot of families here, students like yourself, a lot of them came over here to the States, which is the American story for a better life. They only have had up to a 6th grade education, and my first language was Spanish, and I still, I'm fully bilingual, as you can tell, in English and Spanish. And they didn't have the privilege of having higher education, but I was really fortunate that they did, with time, appreciate education, and partly because of the migrant education. Like I mentioned, Salinas. It is a farm worker community, and there was the migrant education in Salinas, and my parents got involved in that, and they, soon came to learn that maybe education was important. But when I was growing up, I did, their main goal was to graduate from high school. That was it. It wasn't necessarily to go on. It was just graduating from high school. And like I said, I'm going to tell you a little bit about just my evolution as a student. And I remember in high school, I almost didn't graduate because I was taking an English class and I didn't do a lot of the reading. Like Olivia said, if you have something coming up, make sure you get that, study or, study for that test or do that project. And I remember, talking to a counselor or a teacher, I don't recall who it was, but said, says, if you don't turn in those reports, you're not going to graduate. And so I quickly learned about the grades, got my reports in, and graduated. So I was really happy about that. And anyway, so after I graduated, I did go to Mexico for a year. I took a gap year before gap years were popular, and you take a break in between high school and college. And part of that was because, I had a cousin who came to live with us when we were in Salinas. And then, she invited me to go to Mexico to live with her. And just, it was really probably very timely because I was starting to get rebellious with my parents. And I know some of the women here can probably understand if you have parents from the old school, they want to raise you the old school, and they don't give you a lot of permission to go out, and I was getting really tired of that. And I remember telling my mom, before I left to Mexico, I was like, Mom, I'll say it in Spanish and I'll say it in English, and Mom, cuando yo regrese, me voy a quedar hasta las 12, that I was going to stay out until midnight. And of course I added on 18, I could do that. I had just a little bit of attitude, but I went to Mexico and I realized, oh my gosh, if I thought my parents were strict, they were even more strict in Mexico, so lesson learned there. But anyway, so, and like I mentioned, that I was going to mention to you about some of those motivators when going to go on to school. One of those motivators was that I did get away, I wanted to get away from Salinas, and so that's why when there's this opportunity to go to Mexico, I was like, sure, I'll go anywhere, because I thought it was boring. I didn't see a future in Salinas, and so I just took the opportunity to just go anywhere. I'll take it, I'll go, and also I thought it was going to gain some freedom, but quickly realized it didn't. So anyway, so spent some time in Mexico for a year, and then came back, and then into community college in my hometown, Hartnell, and I was really proud. My parents were also proud, and with that kind of maturity and responsibility that I was showing, I was starting to get a little bit more permission to go out. So that was really the motivator. I just wanted a little bit more freedom as far as going out. And I did realize that since my parents now did appreciate the education, that I could do a lot more if I got involved in education and activities. I was involved in MedChat, got involved in different activities because I could get more permissions that way. And so anyway, but I still didn't have the study skills, okay? Because, like I said, I barely kind of graduated from high school, got to college, was proud of being a college grad, and made it, but then was like, now what? I didn't have those study skills. And I can't tell you how many W's I had. And I remember vividly one night that I was studying, and mind you, a lot of my friends didn't graduate and weren't going to college. I had met some new friends in college, and they came over, and it was Thursday night. I remember it was a Thursday night, so I was busy studying for a big test, whether it's a final, midterm, I don't want to call it. And my friends came over and they said, hey, they used to call me Patty. They said, hey, Patty, do you want to go cruising? I said, sure. But this time I could go out a little bit more. And of course, I didn't tell my parents the truth. I told them I was going to go to movies. In fact, my friends caught me back and said, my mom thinks I'm at the movies. That was always my excuse. And so I got to, went out with my friends, had a good time, came back. The following morning, I obviously didn't do well because all I remember thinking, what a bad decision that was. And I realized then I had this moment of desperation because I realized if I didn't get serious about my studies, I was never going to get out of Salinas, and I desperately wanted to get out. So anyway, so I just, kind of, mind you, I do have older brothers and a younger sister, and one of my brothers had decided to go to college, and so he was going to school also to Hartnell with me. And he was planning on transferring to Sacramento State. So I realized then, I gotta get out, and if it means going with my brother, I'll go with my brother. And so I talked to the counselors, whoever I needed to talk to find out, what do I need to do to just get transferred? My brother was working on his AA, his degree from community college. For me, I just realized, it doesn't matter. I just need to get out. And so I got whatever I needed to do, got my units, and to Sacramento State. And the reason we chose Sacramento State is because that was where we could afford to live. And that's where we could find a job. And partially because, my dad, he had a heart attack at age 42. He's still alive, as I mentioned. But that meant he was in and out of disability. And at some point, he was permanently placed on disability in his early 50s or something. And my mom was a seasonal worker. She worked at a packing shed, a salary packing shed. And so we knew they weren't going to be able to help us out. So it was very important that we went somewhere that was affordable for us and that we could find a job. And so that was how we ended up going to Sacramento State. I did have a friend who was in LA, and he was a little bit older, mature, more serious student. And I remember he called me and told me, because he knew I was thinking about going to college, and he said, well, why don't you apply to UC Berkeley? And remind you, this is the day when nothing was on the internet, there was no cell phones, no anything. And I did, I thought about it, I think that maybe I'll apply to UC Berkeley, because it was a big city, or an excitement, it's like, that sounded good. And I remember looking at the application for UC Berkeley, and I paused when I saw that I had to write an essay. I saw the essay, and I said, forget it, I'm not applying, because I thought, who wants to hear about my life, my boring life, my parents who don't have they only have a 6th grade education, my dad's on disability, my mom's a seasonal worker, no one's gone on to school, like, well, why would they want to hear my story? So I didn't apply. And so anyways, I went to Sacramento State, and I majored in business. And just the FYI, if you want to go on to medical school, you can major in anything you want, okay? But you have to do your pre-med curriculum, and I'll get back to that in a moment. So anyways, I went to Sacramento State, and for me, Sacramento State meant my ticket out of Salinas. So that was, again, one of the great motivators just to get out of Salinas. Not that I still love Salinas as my hometown. I don't want to talk bad about my hometown. But for me, I just wanted something different. I just knew if I stayed in Salinas what my path was going to be. And I was willing to take that risk to just do something different, even if I didn't know what it was. So I majored in business because that was the most familiar to me. Because, I had uncles or Latinos who had Mexican restaurants, and I think I could do business. And so anyway, so that's what I decided to do. And also, when I was at Sacramento State, I learned something about, or I had heard it was an international program. And, when I was younger, when I was 14 or 15, I do remember thinking, I was curious. That was the other one. I was always curious, well, what's that other one? Because when you have parents who are so strict, sometimes you just kind of imagine what are other people's lives like. And so I remember telling a friend of mine, there's something, I really want to go to Spain and Italy. I don't know how I'm going to get there, but I'd really love to visit those countries. And so when I went to Sac State, I found out that there was an international program. And so I quickly went over there, got my brochures, found out what do I need to do to apply to this program, and what's the budget. And anyway, so I figured that out, and then a year later, I applied and got accepted. And by the way, I eventually will get back. We'll get to the point where I decided to go to medical school. I just, if you're wondering, it wasn't a typical path. But anyway, so I, got accepted to go to Spain, to Madrid. But I still didn't have the financial support. So I knew it was going to be really important to get that money. And so I worked 3 jobs. One summer I was working at a pharmacy, worked Domino's Pizza, and I worked at a motel cleaning rooms. So I desperately wanted to go to Spain. And because I didn't depend on my parents because they just didn't have the money. And so when the time came, I still needed $1,000 to go. But I didn't tell my parents because I knew that they would say I couldn't go. My mom was saying that if it weren't for my dad supporting the idea, I wouldn't be going. So that was the last thing I was going to tell them, is that I didn't have the money to go. And for me, when you're in your 20s, a lot of times you just think about what you can do. You just solve the problem. And I just figured, what? My parents came over here, they found a job. I can go to Spain, I can find a job. And I had heard that me, a job teaching English. And again, this is before internet, so it's not like you could Google and find out anything. And so I took that risk, and I went to Spain, and I got a job. I got a job teaching English, and that's how I survived there. And for me, Spain, what Spain represented to me was freedom. freedom to really just be on my own. Because when I went to Sacramento State, it was still with my older brother, so I still had eyes on me. And again, the great motivator was freedom. I wanted that freedom. And so when I went to Spain, it was incredible freedom. It was just a breath of fresh air. But I realized then, well, I guess I didn't realize until later, that even besides anything, I think we're crazy, but it was just really great to just be able to make my own decisions. But also what I realized that I had, that I did not anticipate, was the freedom of my mind. You see, because I really was looking at life black and white. And when I went to Spain, just being in a whole other world and just being on my own, I just really realized life is about shades of gray. And all of a sudden, my mind just opened. And something that I wasn't anticipating. So anyway, so for me, Spain represented freedom. I spent a year there, came back, finished my bachelor's in business. And at that point, I had a boyfriend who was now my husband. He got inspired also to study abroad or do something abroad. And at that point, he had also switched over to business. And at that point in the 80s, being in Japan, studying Japanese was really just something that was promising as a career. And so my husband had been studying Japanese, and so I also started studying Japanese and got involved in the Japanese language and culture club. Because again, one of my drivers and my motivation that got me into studying was also my curiosity. I just really was curious about a lot of things, and so, I'd already gone to Mexico, spent some time in Spain, and so why not study Japanese, And so we were very fortunate that by the time that we graduated, there was a Japanese firm that brought Bridgestone who was looking for someone like us, someone who spoke English, someone who spoke Spanish, and who spoke some Japanese. So our first professional job, my professional job was in Tokyo, Japan. And so that's where I ended up. And the whole idea was I was going to be there for 5 years. We were going to continue to learn Japanese and learn a computer language, and then eventually go off to Belgium and Spain, which is what I really wanted. But after a year, I know from talking to my husband, who had been a pre-med major at UC Davis, just told me, there's something about this job. I know it's a wonderful job. We have a great future ahead. There's just something that just, no me llena, it's fulfilling. And he's the one who said, it's like maybe what you want is, I think you want to become a doctor. I do. And I really, it was like a light bulb thing. And my husband in Tokyo, Japan, was my first pre-med major, a pre-med advisor. Because it wasn't until 24, it was maybe 25 at the time, that I even thought of going to medical school. But I was in a dilemma. Do I give up this great career and go back and do my pre-med? But I had done mostly none of it. And there's no guarantee to go to medical, I would be accepted into medical school. Do I leave that leap of faith? Do I take that leap? And after a lot of discussion, my husband and I decided, okay, we're going to come back. My parents thought we were crazy. Everybody thought we were crazy. I thought, in some ways, I thought it was crazy. Well, what am I doing? And at that point, it was just really, coming from the heart. It was like I realized, this is what I want to do. And so I went back to Sacramento and enrolled and found out what I needed to do. And, being a doctor is always being a detective, right? So again, I was always really good about, hey, what do I need to do to show me? And, just doing that kind of research. And so I figured out, okay, what do I need to do? And so I found out that I could major in anything I wanted, because I thought I had to go back and do biology or chemistry. And I said, no, all you need to do is do the pre-med curriculum. And the pre-med varies a little bit from school to school. So I'm not sure if you've talked to your counselors here. The pre-med curriculum basically means 1 year biochemistry, 1 year chemistry, maybe 1 or 2 semesters of chemistry, biology, English, physics, calculus, statistics. So anyway, I had maybe done 1 course, like English. And so I had to chart, again, like, what do I need to do? And I realized it was going to take me about 2.5 years to do that pre-medical exam. And that was 25 at the time. So I was like, okay, maybe I'll be 28. And I remember telling my husband, if I'm not in medical school at age 30, that's it, I'm not going. And then it so happened that somewhere along the way, it was probably maybe that first or second semester, the CSU system changed their policy. They said if you already have a degree, you have to pay a lot more for those units. So, and it was pretty expensive. And so it was 2.5 years, ended up being a 5-year plan. And again, it was very discouraging. I was very discouraged because I'm thinking, I can't believe it. It's going to be up and I'm going to be over 30 by the time I finish my pre-med curriculum. But fortunately, my husband was very supportive. And besides, I love the sciences. I really, really quite like it. I love biology. I just really enjoyed studying all this. So I kept at it. And at age 31, I applied to medical school. And to my surprise, I was admitted at Stanford. Believe me, everyone was shocked, and so was I. And I almost didn't apply, but I learned that lesson of not applying to Berkeley. Not that I think I would have gotten in, because I did have a lot of W's, but at this time I listened, and I did apply. And so then I went to Stanford Medical School. And while at Stanford, again, there was the evolution of that student. It wasn't really serious when I was in high school, maybe a little bit more serious when I went to Sacramento State. And then certainly, increase my commitment once I started doing my pre-med. And then once in medical school, I obviously had to. And so I was 32 when I got into medical school. I was one of the 3 eldest there. When I didn't have family, right? And all of a sudden I realized, wow, I really want to be a mom. And so I had no choice but to think about having a family during medical school, which I thought was crazy, but I just hadn't, I had no choice. And so I had my 2 boys during medical school. And fortunately, I had a very supportive husband and supportive family who helped out. And I didn't know if I was, I was actually going to graduate. I mean, I knew it was, but I was pregnant with my second son, and he was expected right around when graduation was going to take place. And I guess, fortunately, was born 3 days prior to the graduation. And so I was fortunate enough to get through the graduation ceremonies. But anyway, after graduation, so once you graduate, you become a medical doctor, but you're not licensed to practice. And then after that, it comes residency. And residency, it typically is around 3 years. And that is when you do your training. And that is a great number of hours. You're working like 100 hours a week. When I was leaving, they had just instituted a policy where you only work 80 hours a week. But it was very trying, lots of tears. And I remember reaching out to a friend of mine who was also a mom. There's several of us who have become moms during the course of medical school. And we kind of, bonded, but, we weren't able to see each other that often, but we certainly knew that, it was like we needed an intervention. Like we called, we knew something, someone wasn't doing well, we got together. And so I called one of my friends because I was really, really having a tough time and was really wondering, is this worth it? Because I felt really bad that I wasn't really seeing my boys. And when I asked her, Eunice, is it worth it? And she was in your head. I said, yes it is. Just keep on going. And sometimes it was just day to day that I just struggled to finish. But I have to say, it did. And I'm very happy that I did. Because now I'm at the Palo Alto Medical Foundation and I get to serve the community. And I do serve a large patient population, but I do serve the community at large. And my evolution also as a student has been, or as a person, has been to become a global citizen. And now my focus is also botanical medicine or herbal medicine. And that's something that, again, that driver, that curiosity, I've realized that, for me, as a doctor, you're always learning. And the body is just so incredibly beautiful and complex, and you never, never stop learning. And it's also very humbling because you realize you're never going to know everything. And for me, in some ways, I'm going back to my roots by studying botanical medicine because that's what I grew up with. And I really didn't see many doctors as a child because my mom would do all these home remedies. And now, I'm starting to appreciate those botanical herbs or therapies. And I feel like I just continue to grow as a person and grow professionally as a physician. And so anyway, I just want to share with you some of those lessons learned. Sorry, I need to look at my card here. And so one of them, before I get to these things, so one of them, like I said, is don't close those doors of opportunities like I did maybe when I felt like nobody wanted to hear my story when I was applying or transferring to university. Secondly, that freedom, sometimes we think of freedom as only having permission to go out socially. For me, because my parents were so strict, I just wanted to go out. And the freedom also means freeing your mind. Free that mind, and what that means is to have that flexibility. And if anything I've learned as becoming a doctor, and what I tell my boys too, is that for me, education, in the sense of getting an education, means that you can process things the analogy is like a camera, where you can zoom in and zoom out, with the information, right? You zoom in, you zoom out with the information, and you also look at things from different angles, because everyone has a different mind, has a different opinion, has a different way of seeing things. And so for me, as a doctor, that's what I need to do. I need to be able to zoom in, all the information is being shared with me from the patient. I need to be able to zoom in on what's important, and I need to be able to zoom out to look at the patient as a whole, and I need to look at it from different angles, just like a camera. And I think that that's the educational process that takes place. And I think that's what science does for me when I take those science courses. It's that analytical thinking. It's that process of bringing your mind to think about things in a very fluid and flexible way. But also, the experience that I had in Spain was also, in retrospect, was besides, just for me meaning freedom, I realized that taking those art courses were actually pretty important. And believe me, I was not an art person, and I only took these courses because, that's what I had to take. And I think about it now, that if I were to say that if you could add art to STEM, so STEAM, that would also enhance your analytical skills, because it's really about observation. When you think about art, it's about observation, and that's a lot of what I have to do as a physician. And I think that's true for a lot of professions. And so that's another thing. It's how to free your mind in so many different ways, and just to take to heart not only the sciences but also the art and literature courses. I think they have a lot to offer. And then also one of the important lessons that I learned along the way was that you can shape your future. That's one thing, coming from a very traditional family, I didn't realize that I could make my own decisions, right? Because you don't practice it, because they don't allow you to, because they're telling you what to do or not to do. Or, I had older brothers. I was being bossed around by them. And so anyway, I learned along the way that I could shape my future. Like how I decided, I need to get out of Salinas. I need to do something about this. And, I applied, find out what I needed to do, and it changed the trajectory of my life. Then it's like, I really wanted to study abroad. And I found out that there was a program I could do that. And if I just applied, maybe it could happen, and it did happen. And so that's one thing I learned that I evolved for me, was that I could shape them. And to go down this way. I don't know what that road is going to lead to. But sometimes you just really have to take that leap of faith. You have to be courageous and just take it and just go down that path. And then lastly, that for me, I love books and I love education, and that's why I'm here. Because education has been transformational for me. And like I said, when I go back to Salinas and realize my future could have been so different. And it wouldn't have been filled with all these adventures that I've had. And I wouldn't be in the position that I am where I'm able to help people and help the community. And so for me, education, it doesn't matter what you study, it doesn't matter what you do, but just keep educating yourself. And I think that the fact that you're here tells me that you're on that path. And so anyway, so like I said, I'm here to hopefully encourage those who are already thinking of becoming a doctor to continue that path. And for those who are not even thinking about it, hopefully I can at least plant that seed for you, just like my husband did. I was 24 and 25 when he planted that seed for me, and I never thought about it. And so I'm here to hopefully plant that seed, and may or may not be for you, but just to entertain that. And the reason I say that is because, and this is where the slides come in, is that we really need you to become doctors. And this is why. And I just did a quick search last night. And, I'm Latina, so I focus on, I just did a search on Latino doctors. And, this is just it goes on from 2010 to the most recent. These are just headlines about how we need Hispanic doctors. There's a shortage. There's a community that's in need. The U.S. needs more Hispanic medical students. The rate of Latino physicians shrink, even if the population swells. And just how, it's worsening. There aren't that many primary care doctors, and it's even worse as far as the numbers for Latino doctors. Again, it's just on and on. And it doesn't matter what race or culture you're from, but just, learn another language. And if you're seeing that, if you don't speak Spanish, learn Spanish. Or, I don't know, I'm part of the Cultural Competence Committee at Palo Alto Medical Foundation. Our Cultural Competence Committee consists of Russian, South Asian, Chinese, LGBT, and the Latinos. And so really, we're very diverse in the Bay Area. So we need all of you, okay? And just that America needs a more diverse physician workforce. We need to reflect our communities. I'll let you guys read that. So again, that's why we're here, because we need more doctors. So my parting words, I do want to leave room for questions. Is to be curious, be courageous. Allow yourself to dream. Sometimes we are overstimulated. Allow yourself to dream better. And if there's anything I found out, that there's enough room for everyone's happiness. So that is it. So we have questions.
Thank you, Patricia. And if anyone needs to leave for classes, feel free to do so. And Patricia will answer some questions, and she'll probably stay afterwards too, if you have any more questions. So let's go ahead.
What would you say? I think I've been here. What would you say was your biggest advantage and disadvantage being an older student with when you went into medical school?
So I think that's a good question. I think the biggest advantage was I was more mature, and there's a lot writing on this, and so I just I knew this is what I wanted, and I think that was the great advantage. The disadvantage was that I was just older, and I had to think about having kids. when people see passion, in some ways I think age maybe doesn't matter. You know, but I think if anything, with the years of that life, you know, just kind of life experiences, I was able to find passion. I'm not sure if I answered that question. But that's my response.
What's your take on, especially as a career changer, being a physician assistant, given that between medicine and being a PA, they're both founded in medicine, so with knowledge when you go to school, is it really going to serve or sort of bridge the gap where we need more healthcare providers and having these sort of mid-level healthcare providers? Or is your take still, you know, in order to be an effective leader in the medical community, you should really pursue medicine and do that?
You know, that's a difficult question to answer, and because, you know, well, now that I have to reflect, and I have to say that this was a tough presentation for me, because I'm used to giving presentations for more, you know, diabetes, hypertension, etc. And this presentation made me reflect on that path, and I realized that it's not easy. And I think that if anyone else would have encouraged me to become a medical doctor, or push me, right? Push me, I don't know if I would have been happy about it. And so what I'm trying to say is, like, it's a real personal decision. But when it comes to being a leader, I think just the fact that you have an education, if you're a PA, that's going to be fine. You know what I'm saying? If that's what you want, you will be an effective leader. You'll be effective in the community. But if you're getting a PA because you don't know, if you didn't go to medical school, or that's just kind of if you're selling yourself short, go for it. Go to medical school. But I think there is a role for the mid-levels. And we have nurse practitioners at Palo Alto Medical Foundation, and we work with them closely. And the only difference is that sometimes we have to supervise that, and they only have as much autonomy as a physician does, but they're still leaders. And I think just the fact that you have an education, and whatever it is, you will be a leader, and it's going to be up to you. But I think with that kind of decision making, you have to do a lot of reflection on what does it take. And I think just making an informed decision, looking into what does it mean, what does that path look like to be a physician's assistant, and what does that path look like to become a medical doctor. And I have to say, I know one of the bigger things is that it's shorter duration of school, and also maybe less expensive. Then the flip side, I know that I took out some loans, and because I took out those loans, that's why I also made sure I graduated and pursued because I knew the only way I was going to be able to pay back those loans is if I made a doctor's salary. So so it could be an advantage or a disadvantage, but for me it was a motivator because I needed to pay back those loans. So I was telling Olivia, I have a very good friend who is a physician's assistant, and she's awesome. And she is she's an incredible leader in the community. She works with adolescents. She works with refugees who come over, and she's had an astounding career. So maybe it'd be great to have her over here. But I think that they're all the levels are well respected. That's one thing I think as a doctor, you learn to be a team player, and everyone has a role on the team, and they're all just as valuable.
Any questions? Any other questions?
Do you ever feel like you can't give your patients all the time you would like to?
All the time. All the time. And because, we're unfortunately at a time in medicine where it's become, I guess, a little bit industrialized in some ways. And but as medical doctors, I think that we realize we need to be the stewards of our profession. And there's a lot of sacrifice that went along the way to be where we are in the sense of, that education and that knowledge. And I don't think we're going to give that up easily in the sense of the reason we chose this profession was because we want to help and we want to be healers. And I think that the fact that we're seeing folks here going into integrative medicine, and the fact that when I went to a conference on alternative and integrative medicine, which is really for a lot of people who feel they are healers, come together. I had my preconceptions of who was going to be at the conference. I thought it was going to be mostly middle-aged women, Caucasian, who were going to be at that conference, and I realized that it was men, and it was young and older physicians. And so anyway, just to say that I think that there's a movement of us doctors who want to get the healing back into the practice. Because there are a lot of forces out there that are trying to move in a certain direction. But I'm very optimistic that as physicians, we will be stewards of our profession and will keep the healing.
Prior to going to medical school, did you ever have any exposure to medical field before you even went to medical school at Stanford?
None at all. None. Other than my husband who was a pre-med major. I mean, at least when I decided, let me step back. So I did the pre-med curriculum, but that was before not knowing anybody, and besides my husband talking to him about pre-med. But then once I was doing the pre-med curriculum at Sacramento State, I did work at a doctor's office. And I remember it was a dilemma for me because I was going to, I got this job at a doctor's office. And part of it, right, because, when you apply for medical school, they want to know, do you know what it means, to become a doctor? Have you been exposed, right, to a physician's office, or do you know a physician? Do you know what you're getting yourself into? And so anyway, so I got this job at a doctor's office. But I was also applying at different locations, and I applied for Ann Taylor, the young women might know here, it's a clothing store. And I really love Ann Taylor. I really wanted to work there because I could get, some discounts. And so I really debated, do I work at the doctor's office or do I go work at Ann Taylor? And so I obviously went to go work at the doctor's office. But so anyway, and so, and he was, he was a mentor. He was a mentor. And I remember him telling me, Patricia's like, yeah, because it's always about helping people, right? And that's what I told him. I was doctors, I help people, etc. And I remember him telling me, so that sounds good. He said, you know what? You got to be a good scientist. You got to be good at what you do. So those were his words. It's like, you can go out there and help people, but you got to have the knowledge. You've got to be good. So I took that down, and that's why propelled me to being a very serious student. Any other questions?
Do you have an idea of what to expect as a med student?
So this is going back to that question, the advantage and disadvantage of being an older student. I think that it's really good to say that you're going to be studying, and it's going to be a different kind of study. I remember, just to highlight, I remember going to my hematology class because we studied blood. It's just blood. It's just like a whole, course on just blood. And you try to prepare the day before, and I was already a better student, so I tried to prepare the night before, and I was already behind 8 chapters first day. So, and I think what it is that you have to learn how to filter information. I think you guys are going to have an advantage because, again, this is before internet, and you already are being bombarded with so much information, right? You already have to filter through a lot. And so I think you're already getting a dose of what happens when you become a physician. You have to filter through a lot of information because a patient comes in and they tell you a story, right? And you have to try to figure out what's pertinent and what's not pertinent. Like what are the things that I have to consider to the story and what things I don't. And so I think you guys have an advantage already because you're already filtering through so much information. But anyway, so I think it's just it's going to be a lot of studying, and it's going to push you because tell my boys, you know, with any new material that you get, you know, any new chapter, you look at the table of contents of that chapter and kind of get an idea of how, you know, what you can be looking at in that material. Because at least that way you know where to put that information when you go to the lecture. And I think also that it's very humbling because, like I said, there's just so much information thrown at you. And, you know, if you're a pre-med and you're, you know, striving to go to medical school, you know, you're used to getting those A's and you're used to, you know, doing really well. And there's going to be a time you just can't learn everything, right? And so it's a very humbling experience. But it's also a great satisfaction because you start learning about the body. And I have to say, it just, this, you know, we're in Silicon Valley and I love technology. For me, the body is just so beautiful and so complex and there's so much to learn that I think after a while, that's when you realize that you just want to learn more and more. And you just, I don't know, in some ways I guess you get addicted to learning and reading and information. And so that's a nice thing. At first it's challenging, but then afterwards you just get used to it. You get used to just learning. And then in residency, that's when the real challenge is because that's when you work a lot of hours. But you know, you make it. Sometimes you do it day by day, but you know, you develop the stamina. And sometimes you get deconstructed. You know, you get asked questions or maybe something didn't go right. And you're very humbled, but you pick yourself up and you keep on going. And so I think it's a lot of growth, a lot of personal growth, a lot of growth in many different ways. But I think that if this is what you want, I mean, for me, despite all those challenges, I still just really loved learning. Like I said, it just really loved it. And I still do. So if you're one of those who just really just know more and more and you know, you just want to be a student for life, this is it. This is really our student for life.
How would you compare your studying and learning when you were in med school to when you were doing your residency?
Oh, yeah. Boy, and that med school was a long one. Because in residency, it is tough. You know, now they've changed it. We only work 8 hours a week, but I remember one of my attendees. An attendee is like with that supervising doctor, and he would say, "You just have 20 minutes every day. 20 minutes every day." Sounds simple enough, but when you're in residency, and you're on call, you're working all day, all night, and all day, and you're carrying a lot of patients. And pretty sick patients, 20 minutes is a patient. But I got into the habit of reading 20 minutes is something. I just want to learn something, maybe a particular patient. And I got into the habit of reading 20 minutes. I just did 20 minutes, even with kids, I just had to read 20 minutes. And it's so funny, after I finished residency, I was so used to reading, I was just used to staying awake. That took me 9 months to finally sleep. And all I did was read. You know, I was just used to staying awake. I was used to reading, you know, just learning. And even now, I still read 20 minutes. You know, I read 20 minutes. But because when it comes to residency, you are learning by experience. And so that's the difference. In medical school, it's more lecture, it's more theory. In residency, you know, you're connecting, you know, heart attack to a patient that it actually happened to. You're connecting a stroke to a patient. It's not the medical. You're treating that patient. So it's more hands-on. That's a major one of the differences. Any other questions? I hope I didn't scare you. Well, I'm always here. You know, Olivia knows where to find me.